Hey Prodigy, Mr. Jeremy back for the final part of our video here on foundational shapes. In this one, we're going to set up a still life group of objects on the tabletop and show you how we're going to break those down, reconstruct them into a full two-dimensional drawing with all the skills that we've learned so far about circles, squares, rectangles, and their three-dimensional combinations. Let's get started on this. Okay, so now I've set up a simple little still life demonstration here. You can pick any objects that you have lying around the house. Just try to keep it simple when you're starting. You can get into more complex stuff later down the road. But for right now, we're going to start with some simple objects and show you how I would go about just breaking these down into a structure. And again, depending on how and where we're looking at these, you might see things differently than I do. If I'm looking down from the side coming in this way, I'm going to be seeing these objects in a different way than if I were over here looking at them. This orange ball would be covering up our tennis ball if I were looking at it this way. So your drawing will be different than anybody else's. That's the cool thing about still life drawing and visualizing the world from our own perspective and trying to turn it into art is it is all subjective. It is all based on our perception of what we see in the world. Now if I were to turn it over here, or even coming from this side, from the back side of this plant, we wouldn't see these two balls at all. They might be completely covered up by this base of the plant. So I'm just going to show you what I see here and how I can help you break that down into a actual still life drawing. And again, we're going to keep this simple, just using the basic shapes. We're not going to get too detailed with proportions and adding in shadows and stuff just yet, but we can see that there's this basic structure of our square for the top of our plant, and coming off of that, it looks like it's got some depth here based on the angle that it's sitting. And it's okay to kind of just guess, but you want to get as accurate as you can with these basic shapes. The rest of it, as we're just sketching out here, we can just kind of imply that these shapes are there. I'm using all these little half circle techniques just to kind of show that there's some leaves there, and we can use just single lines to add in where those might be. Now I went a little bit further with that than I really needed to, but I did want to show how we can kind of show some depth to that. Again, this is just a quick, simple still life drawing that I want you to try to take some time with and really find where these other shapes might be combined when you create your own still life. Now you can see this tennis ball, or the basketball, excuse me, is kind of sitting off the side over here. And if I draw the contours the way it is, looks like one's missing, but we'll go ahead and just complete that there. And again, you can see this other line here. I wanted to show you all with one different color for each of these objects to show how they correlate to one another. And our tennis ball is kind of sitting here like this. It's got some letters on it here. And you can see if we were to add some shadow in there, we've got a little bit under each of these, and that just kind of grounds it a little bit. Now if I were to draw this from a different perspective, say if I were to get lower and view this from the side, I might see a completely different thing. So I'm going to do that now, just kind of in this bottom space down here, and show you how the perspective, changing this from coming at it from top down, and how if I were to rotate down here, and basically my eye is viewing it from the side as opposed to from the top. And this is really important where perspective comes into play. So the first thing I see, I don't see this giant block here. The first thing I see is this orange ball coming from the side. And I see another ball sitting next to it that's slightly larger. And again, these contours are going to be different on here because I'm viewing it at a different angle. Whereas this was you could see much more of this X here. Over here, it's not as much. And on this, I see this corner, again, even though I can see it there, it's coming differently on the plant here. I actually see this plant coming out the back over here. Using my mind's eye, I'm going to imply that there's a back here. Even though I don't really see it, I know that there's another side of this plant. But for now, I can just kind of break these down into the basic shapes and show you how, from a different angle, we can get the same exact drawing with these objects. But again, the nice thing about a basketball is it shows us that contour. It shows us that three-dimensional space. You can really see how it changes based on the angle of what you're looking at. And that's a big portion of creating our compositions, is recognizing that we have a different perspective. And in order to get that perspective across, we really have to practice on these basic shapes, breaking them down and seeing how they might change based on how we perceive them, how we look at them.